Hi, I'm Sanjay Nagchowdhury, Development Lead for the IBM App Connect Enterprise product. In this video, I will demonstrate how to get started with using IBM App Connect Enterprise version 12. I'll take you through an overview first. We have a toolkit which allows you to develop your message flows so that you can process messages. We have a console which allows you to administer App Connect Enterprise using commands. And we have a web user interface which allows you to administer your message flows. You can use capability like record and replay and business transaction monitoring. We have a tutorials gallery, and I'm going to show how to use the tutorials gallery by selecting a tutorial and importing it and then using it. So let's do that. First of all, let's start App Connect Enterprise and bring up the tutorials gallery. So I'm using a Windows system and I have App Connect Enterprise version 12 installed. I'm going to start the toolkit and I will first be prompted to select a workspace. So I have my workspace selected. I'll click Launch. And now the toolkit has opened and it is showing the welcome page. The welcome page has a link to the tutorials gallery, has a link to the IBM documentation for App Connect Enterprise, and it also has a link to install a language pack. So I can open the tutorials gallery by clicking on the tutorials link. And in the tutorials gallery, I can select from over 100 different tutorials so that I can understand quickly how to use the different capabilities that are provided in IBM App Connect Enterprise. I can filter through the list of tutorials by searching for a specific area. For example, I can type REST and it will show all the tutorials which are related to using REST requests. One of the key use cases of IBM App Connect Enterprise is to transform a message from one format to another. So I'm going to search for a tutorial that shows us how to do a transformation. So if I select transformation, I can see lots of different tutorials which allow me to do a transformation. I'm going to select the very first one, which is using an HTTP input node, which will receive a message over HTTP and transform it. So when I select the tutorial, I can see an overview of the tutorial. It describes briefly what the tutorial does and has a button where I can start the tutorial. So I'll go ahead and click start. So the tutorial steps are shown on the right hand side. Each tutorial has 4 steps. It has an overview, a create step, a prepare step, and a run step. And you can follow through each of these steps to go through the tutorial. Each tutorial has projects which you can import. And the create step has an import button which you can select to import the projects. So I'll go ahead and import the projects for this tutorial. And now I can see that the project has been imported. So before I continue, I'm going to give you an overview of this message flow. And to do that, I'm going to show a description using a slide. So I'm going to talk about using a message flow. So the project that I've just imported from the tutorials gallery contains an application which has a message flow. The message flow receives a JSON message using an HTTP input node. It has a mapping node to transform the JSON message from one format to another. So there are fields called input field 1 and input field 2, and they are renamed to output field 1 and output field 2. And the new JSON message is then sent back in the response by the HTTP reply node. In order to run the message flow, I need to use an integration server. So let's go through what an integration server is. So in order for a message flow to process a message and for the message flow to transform it, the application which contains the message flow must be deployed to an integration server. An integration server is a process which can be started independently, or it can be managed by a component called an integration node. By using an independent integration server, you can quickly deploy and test your integration solutions. The integration server can also be used in a container, which you can run in your cloud deployments. If you want to use the integration server locally, you can start it on the command line or from the toolkit. So before I start using my message flow, I'm going to create an integration server. So I can select the integration servers in the Integration Explorer view. I can right click and select create a local integration server. This brings up a wizard. It has the name of the integration server to be created and some options. I'm just going to leave them with the default values and click finish. This will start the integration server on my machine and will provide me with a link to the console log, which has the output when the integration server is running. So the integration server process has now started, and I can click on this link to view the console log. So I can see that the integration server has started and it can receive administrative REST requests on port 7600. The integration server uses a work directory, and you can access this work directory in the toolkit. And the work directory has a serverconf YAML file, which allows you to configure your integration server. And those configuration options are read when the integration server starts up and it uses them. If I select on integration server, I can see the different properties that it is using in the properties view. So I have imported this project and it contains this message flow. It has an HTTP input node and it is configured to receive a JSON message. It has a mapping node which uses a map to transform the JSON message so that the field input field 1 and input field 2 are changed so that the output message contains output field 1 and output field 2. I can test the message by using the flow exerciser. The flow exerciser is a tool in the toolkit which allows you to run messages through a message flow. So I clicked this record button here. That has actually deployed the application and the message flow to the integration server. And now I can send a message to the flow. So an example input message has been provided by the tutorial, and I can click send. So I can now see that the input message has been sent to the flow and the output message has been received. And I can see that the output message contains the new field values. Using the flow exerciser, I can click on the highlighted connection to see the content of the message. So I can see the message before it was transformed. So this shows the message body, it shows it is using the JSON domain and it has the fields input field 1 and input field 2. And if I click on the message icon on the connection after the mapping node, I can see the message has the new field names, output field 1 and output field 2. So that was a simple message flow which I used to transform a JSON message, and I imported that project using the tutorials gallery. I'm now going to show you how to create a message flow from scratch, and I will use a transformation node to convert the message. But this time I will convert it so that a JSON message is transformed into an XML message. So I will create a flow which has an HTTP input node, a compute node, and an HTTP reply node. And the compute node will transform the message from one format to another. So in this case, from JSON to XML. So I am going to create a new message flow in the same application. And I'll call it transform JSON to XML. And I will now construct the message flow. So on the left-hand side here is a palette, and that has a toolbox category and a connectors category. So first of all, I'm going to select an HTTP input node by dragging and dropping it onto the canvas. I need to configure the HTTP input node, so I will need to specify a path suffix. So I'll put a pass suffix to use, and I need to specify that I'll be processing a JSON message. I'm now going to select an HTTP reply node so that a response can be sent to the client that sends the HTTP request. And I'm going to select a node called a compute node, which will transform the JSON message to XML. I can wire it up by selecting the out terminal from the HTTP input node and then select the input terminal on the compute node. Similarly, I'm going to select the out terminal from the compute node and wire it to the HTTP reply node. There's a red cross showing on the compute node because I haven't configured the compute node yet. So I can do this by double clicking on it, and this will bring up an ESQL editor which I can use to configure the compute node. So I will copy the message headers and then I'll add a single line of ESQL which will construct the output message. So I can do this by typing set output root.xml nsc.output message equals input root.json.data. So here I'm telling the compute node to create a new message in the XML NSC domain. It has a root element called output message, and that will contain the message body that was in the input message. And the input message will be under JSON data. So I can now try running my flow using the flow exerciser. And I can send a message to the flow, and I will send the exact same message as before to this flow. So I have input field 1, hello, and input field 2, which has world. And if I send this message, I can see that the input message contained JSON and the output message contains XML, and the root element has output message, and under the output message it has the elements from the input message. As before, I can click on the message icon on the highlighted connection, and I can see the input message before the compute node, which has JSON. And I can click on the message icon on the connection after the compute node, and I can see that the message body is using the XML NSC domain. It has a root element called output message, and underneath that it has the fields from the input message. So that was an example of creating a message flow from scratch and doing a transformation using a compute node to transform a JSON message to XML. I'm now going to create another message flow which shows how to use a different protocol. So far I've been using HTTP. IBM App Connect Enterprise can support a variety of different protocols and message formats. In this example, I'm going to put a message to IBM MQ, and I'm going to create a brand new message flow which will read the message from the input queue. It will do exactly the same transformation as before, and put the XML message to an output queue which I can then read from the queue.